Okay. Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the London Business Climate Action Summit. I'm Pete Dorr, Head of Climate Change at the GLA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon. The Mayor of London and the CBI are co-hosting this event because we must accelerate our transition to a zero carbon economy, and of course that requires action from a number of people. It requires action from all of us, including the business sector. And we hope that this afternoon's event will help all London businesses to make the case for setting ambitious targets to decarbonise, particularly in the lead up to COP later in the year. And we hope we can give you the optimism and the confidence that the sort of optimism and confidence a win against Germany gives you in relation to football is our ambition to leave you with today. I'm delighted to be joined today by businesses leading the effort from across London, so CBI members, members of the Mayor's London Business Climate Leaders Group, and also London First members. And our speakers today include Fiona, Group Director of Bigger Picture at Sky, Damian Wisniewski, Chief Financial Officer at Derwent London, Pillai, Partner Sustainable Initiatives at Circled Up, Edgell, Director of Sustainability and Procurement at Morgan Sindall Group, and last but not least, Mahon, Vice President, Global Corporate Citizenship and Sustainability at Estee Lauder Companies. And we'll hear as we go through a case study from each of those businesses on what they are doing to accelerate their own efforts towards net zero and net zero targets. And we will follow that by a panel discussion. I'd encourage all of you, if you're interested in submitting a question, to do so via the Zoom Q&A function, and we will pick those up. Please submit those with your name and organisation, and we will get through as many of those following the panel. We'll get through as many of those as we can in the panel discussion itself. The session today is being recorded, and we will make that available also through the London Climate Action Week website. And so to kick us off, I will now hand over to the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to formally open the event.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the London Business Climate Action Summit. I want to start by thanking you all for being a part of this event today and for reaffirming your commitment to tackling the climate emergency. I'm delighted that so many businesses are engaging with this event. And I want to say a special thank you to Tony Danker, the Director General of the CBI, not only for your involvement with this summit, but for your leadership on this issue. I know that London's businesses have been hit hard by COVID-19, and it would be understandable if your focus was elsewhere right now. So you deserve huge credit for having the foresight to recognise the urgency of addressing the climate crisis, as well as the opportunities it presents for your companies. Because we should be clear, going green isn't just good for our air, our planet, and our children. It's also good for our businesses, both today and in the future. As Mayor of London, I've set a bold target of making our city carbon neutral by 2030. Inevitably, some will question if it's possible and whether it's too ambitious. But to those people, I say this: when it comes to confronting the twin challenges of air pollution and the climate crisis, we can't afford to be anything other than ambitious. With the clock ticking, we all have a responsibility to meet these challenges: politicians, businesses, and individuals. Indeed, protecting our precious natural environment and saving our planet from unsustainable levels of warming is not something that can be left to others. It's everyone's business. With industrial and commercial emissions making up a third of London's overall emissions, the private sector has a vital role to play. And so I'm calling on London's businesses to join us in this mission and to do everything you can to decarbonise and to help us hit our target of net zero by no later than 2030. As we seek to rebuild following this terrible pandemic, I've made clear that climate action will be key to getting our city back up on its feet and tackling the inequalities and injustices that have been so starkly exposed by this pandemic. My flagship Green New Deal for London will help to stimulate our economy, create much needed green jobs, and speed up our recovery from this crisis, ensuring that we're not simply replacing one public health emergency with another. Let me end by saying this. I know that committing to net zero can seem daunting, but organisations like the CBI, London First, and my London Business Hub are here to help you every step of the way. And our London business climate leaders stand ready to offer all the advice and support you need. We know what's at stake. So let's all get going. We haven't a second to waste. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Mahon. As he said there, we haven't got a second to waste, and not least in this seminar. So I hope that gave you a sense of the urgency of the action we need to take, but also the opportunity. As the Mayor said, it's good for business, good for the environment, and also important for creating a fairer London for everyone living in the city too. So it's now my pleasure to hand over to the Director General of the CBI, Tony Danker, who is going to talk to us about the role that businesses can play in achieving net zero.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Danker, the CBI's Director General, and I'm delighted to join this year's London Climate Action Week. As we meet, the COVID crisis has just devastated our economy. We're 125 days from COP26, and we'll never have a better opportunity to reset our economy or our carbon emissions than right now. The clock is ticking. From Australian wildfires to flooding in Bangladesh, climate action isn't about the future. The urgent need to decarbonise, to commit to net zero and to achieve our targets is right here, right now. So I want to thank, first of all, the Mayor. Sadiq, during your last term, you made it known that London is taking the climate emergency seriously. This really matters because where London goes, the world often follows. This has always been a city at the forefront of global change. And let's be honest, without London, we'll never make it to net zero. The bigger the city, the bigger the impact, and the bigger difference we can make. But it's going to take all of us, business, the Mayor, and all parts of society to make it happen. Now at the CBI, you may have heard us talking about seizing the moment to capture the prizes of a decarbonised economy. And I am genuinely excited by the economic and social potential of net zero and the future we can create. And I know that so many businesses are too. In fact, in recent years, I think we've seen a total transformation in business attitude to this, from seeing decarbonisation as a threat years ago to more recently a risk to be managed or a PR imperative, but now as a genuine source of business value with first mover advantage. It can, however, feel daunting, especially with so many firms still focused on survival. But wherever you are on this journey, the CBI and the GLA are both here to help. whether through insight and guidance, our trade association network, or brilliant events like this. No matter your size, your sector, or your location, we can connect you with peers who can be sharing with you what's going on in your industry, and we can help you talk to policymakers so that together we can bring down barriers to achieving more. We've made great progress. In the past 4 years, the Mayor has set a 2030 net zero target, launched a Green New Deal, and introduced ultra-low emission zones, a world first. And London businesses too have stepped up. Take Goldsmiths University. They're installing a new low-carbon heat network, improving not just emissions on campus, but air quality in the whole of Lewisham. Fresh food company Bakkavor, with their site in London's Park Royal, have just spent £20 million on low-carbon fridges for their UK factories. And Sainsbury's, headquartered of course in Holborn, are banishing thousands of tons of plastic from their shelves. In fact, over half the CBI's London councils, some of the capital's top firms and most exciting SMEs, have publicly committed to net zero by 2050, many by 2040, even some 2030, and some are there already. So if you're looking for more ideas, today the CBI's London Future Leaders Network have launched new guidance for businesses, showing what companies are doing right now to reach net zero and how your business can too. And if you haven't already, use this week to make a public pledge to decarbonise and commit to net zero for good. Together, we really can make a difference. And if there's one thing we'd love to see from the Mayor now, it's to unite the leaders of the UK's cities and regions, all of them, in our effort to decarbonise, showing best practice on green skills strategies, establishing clusters across regions from Hull to Hartlepool to create more renewable energy, and decarbonising public transport. Just think, TfL has over 9,000 buses. Now add to that Manchester's stagecoach fleet and National Express West Midlands fleet. Just imagine how much more attractive that contract is for an electric or hydrogen bus maker in Leeds, Ballymena, Falkirk or Scarborough than any single bus fleet alone. It could be the beginning of a green bus revolution, sparking demand for other electric vehicles too. And next time the brilliant team at TfL get nagged on Twitter, they can proudly say that not only do the London buses run on time, they also run on hydrogen. So the size of the prize is real, and we estimate the net zero transition could create 240,000 net new jobs in the UK over a decade. Improving London's air quality alone could be worth £500 million every year to our economy. We could become the world's leading net zero exporter, building on our existing strengths in tech like carbon capture and storage. In green finance, London's reputation as a centre of excellence could make us the world's #1 decarbonisation enabler. And with over 3 million homes and thousands of offices based here in the capital, London is better placed than most to create new demand for retrofitting expertise from across the UK, benefiting not just the capital, but the whole economy. So make no mistake, London can lead the world's green revolution. London should lead the world's green revolution. And if you're a business watching, now's the time to commit, to decarbonise as quickly as possible, set targets to reach net zero, if you can, by 2030 or soon thereafter. Together, we have to seize the moment, and let's show every other global city how it's done. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. London can and London should lead the transition to net zero, and I'm sure many of you would have been inspired by that keynote as well. You know, where London goes, the world often follows, and it's on us really to seize that opportunity, and we can make a difference. And there are, you know, significant upsides to this in terms of jobs and economic growth, as Tony set out as well. So let's turn our attention now to kind of seizing that moment and hearing from some of our excellent panelists today from leading businesses already on this journey who have made commitments to carbon neutrality. So I'm joined today by Sky, by Derwent London and Morgan Sindall Group, who are part of our own London Business Climate Leaders group. These businesses are committed to working with the Mayor to go further, faster, and to implement London's environment strategy and create a net zero city. Also really pleased to be joined by Estee Lauder Companies, a CBI member business, which in 2020 achieved net zero carbon emissions for their direct operations and continue to work to address value chain emissions as well. And also, I'm pleased to be joined by Pillai from Circled Up, who is a member of the Federation of Small Businesses, who will give a perspective from the SME side of businesses as well. So without further ado, I'd love to sort of hand over now to those businesses to tell you a little bit about the work they've been doing to date. First to talk to us today is Fiona Ball, who is Group Director of the Bigger Picture for Sky. So a warm welcome and thank you for joining us today, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Pete. And what an amazing keynote speech that was by the Director General of CBI. So positive in what needs to be achieved. So I'm going to, over the next few minutes, just take you through three key things. First of all, to give you a bit of an overview about Sky's own commitment around net zero carbon. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the fundamentals that we've found on our journey, the key milestones that we are looking at and addressing as part of our journey, to share as much as possible with other businesses, because we're all in this together. And then thirdly, I'm just going to take you across the kind of key milestones, the key achievements that we've made over the last 18 months. But to start off, so our commitment at Sky, so Sky is a multi-media entertainment company. We are based in the UK, Germany and Italy and Ireland. And we've made a commitment to be net zero carbon by 2030 across our whole value chain. And this commitment is something that follows, we've signed up to the business ambition for 1.5 degrees, and we've had our targets approved by the Science Based Targets Initiative. So in addition to going net zero carbon by 2030, we've made a commitment to halve our overall footprint across our whole value chain, that's scopes 1, 2 and 3 by 50% in those next 10 years, and then continue to reduce our emissions to stay below 1.5 degrees warming. We've also, as part of that, made a commitment we've signed up to the Race to Zero, and we are the principal media partner to support COP at the end of the year in Glasgow. Now, if we go to the next slide, I'll give you a bit more of an overview of what net zero carbon means to Sky. And this is quite a complicated infographic, but I think it just shows the full scope of what a business needs to have a look at when they're making this statement and this ambition. Sky itself has been a carbon neutral as a business since 2006 for its direct business, and we've reduced our carbon footprint by 55% over those last 10 years. In the last 2 years alone, for our scope 1 and 2, we've further reduced our carbon footprint for our direct business by 23%. And this is a really important part for us to reduce our carbon footprint in our direct business scopes 1 and 2 as fast as possible, and hopefully way before the 2030. But our 2030 commitment looks across our whole value chain. So it takes into account the impact that we have in our 11,000 suppliers globally, and also the impact that we have in our products and services in customer homes. So the energy used to watch our services through our products and services, including things like our set-top boxes. And across all of that, we've made the commitment to half the footprint. And then in 2030, to be net zero, we want to absorb the remaining emissions that we have at that point through natural carbon sinks or carbon capture and storage to be net zero, whilst continuing thereafter to reduce our emissions. So our scopes 1 and 2, this is around what we call transforming our business. predominantly looks at the buildings we have, the studios that we have, how our TVs are created, and our fleet. We have over 5,000 both vehicles, company cars, and also vehicle fleet on the road. And as part of that, we've had looking at many ways to transition our electric cars. We've got about 23% of our cars currently are all electric, and we hope to transition that very quickly over the next few years. And we've started to introduce electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles into our van fleet as well. We have 151 plug-in vehicles, and we have about 10 electric vehicles that we're trialing currently. But then when we have a look, we move on, the next stage is really how to start to tackle our scope 3 emissions, so our value chain emissions. And we've been reporting our value chain emissions publicly in our bigger picture impact report, which comes out around June, July time each year. We've been reporting this for the last 5 years. And we're getting more and more accurate with how we look at reporting this and the methodology that we use to get this. Some of this is direct information, direct from our product supply chain suppliers, and some of it is from information from things like the Carbon Disclosure Project. But what we want to do is really engage these 11,000 suppliers. Interestingly, 80% of our carbon footprint from our supply chain comes from just 300 suppliers. So we'll be taking a very focused kind of approach to how we engage our supply chain to reduce it. But we're doing loads in this space at the moment. We're working very closely with our product supply chain to help them around energy efficiency. And we've been supporting our product supply chain specifically in China, where our set-top boxes are made, with the provision of on-site renewables now. And 50% of the energy now comes from on-site renewable energy there. And then the other piece, big piece, is as a broadcaster, we've got a massive opportunity to use our platform to really inspire other businesses, but also inspire our public and also our customers to understand what the solutions are out there and how people can change their own behaviours. And we've got a number of campaigns that we've been working with, one particularly with WWF around being an ocean hero and ensuring that as well as reducing carbon emissions as part of the climate transition, we also need to protect our valuable natural carbon sinks. So we go on to the next slide. Very quickly, I'll take you through the kind of fundamental steps that we think are really important when looking at what your net zero carbon ambition is. First of all, it's really important to get really good governance kind of structure in place. Define where the boundaries are, what your scope of net zero is. Ensure that you've got senior management support across your organisation. We actually have 8 working groups, working streams, working on business transformation across the business, all sponsored by a senior exec and all having senior directors involved with laying out the plans to how they're going to transition to net zero carbon. And of course, they're science-based targets. So we all know exactly what the milestones are across each of these different areas, whether it's technology, whether it's our product supply chain, our procurement teams. They all know exactly what they've got to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years. Understanding the footprint is really important as well. You need to know where to focus your activity on. Our scope 1 and 2 is about 100,000 tonnes. Our scope 3 brings that up to 1.3 million tonnes. And you know, the biggest impact that we have is around the impact in our customer homes from the energy that we use. So we need to know that we need to focus on the efficiency of our products and how we're going to continue to drive down emissions in our product supply chain particularly. The next bit is really defining those key drivers. As I said, you know, we've got 11,000 suppliers, for example, but actually 200 of those suppliers make up the most part of our carbon. So really understanding where the carbon footprint is and the carbon hotspots are can really help you understand which are the big things that we need to really go for. And then developing the strategy is really important as well. And finance teams are amazingly important as part of this, because you need to really embed kind of the strategy and the budget and the resource into the long range plans of the business. to keep the business focused and to ensure that we have enough investment within it. And as part of the strategy, we're also thinking now what we need in 2030 to absorb the remaining carbon to be net zero carbon. So we're looking now about what sort of things and investments can we make in those natural carbon sinks or those technologies that we're going to need to absorb carbon out in the atmosphere as well. And the final thing is, it's all really important. You need the data to kind of continuously look at the data, where you are, track your progress, and look for more continuous improvement. We also publish this, we make it available for everybody to see as part of our impact report, so that everybody can see where we are on our journey. And then finally, I just want to take you through what we've achieved after the last 18 months. You know, we've all been kind of working from home, but things haven't stopped where we've been going for Sky Zero. So we initially made the commitment back in February 2020 to be net zero carbon by 2030. And then after that, we very quickly signed up for the business ambition for 1.5 degrees. We started working on our science-based targets and have just got that approved earlier on in the year. And we signed up to the Race to Zero. The next few things that we've been looking at is where we have a real opportunity to engage other businesses within our sector. And there's 3 key things that I'll probably pull out here. First of all is that we've signed up and we've helped launch Ad Green, which is an initiative to help the advertising area look at setting their own net zero goals and look at how they could focus on production and reducing the environmental impact of making advertising. The other key thing that we launched last year was the Responsible Media Climate Pact. And this was a really important pact bringing together loads of different media organisations across Europe, making their own commitment and pact as an industry organisation to set their goals around net zero carbon. And then the last thing that we really wanted to do was that as we grow as an organisation, we need to ensure that any new development, any new service that we bring to the market has sustainability at its heart. And as part of it, we're building in North London a new studio called Sky Studios Elstree. And we've set ourselves the goal to make sure that that's the most sustainable film and TV studio that it can be. It's going to be amazing with green walls. We've got solar panels on site. We've got over 25% of the energy will be from on-site solar panels on the roofs, and then hopefully another 25% will be through a direct PPA agreement with further kind of solar on site. And there'll be lots of electric vehicles that will be taking people around the site and from the train station. So it's a great ambition, but it kind of just shows as you develop as a kind of business that you need to look at how you're going to do that in an environmentally and climate neutral way. And then obviously looking forward, we've got the principal media sponsor for COP, and we hope that we can, in the run up to COP over the summer, really engage as many audiences as possible around the conference that's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. That's really impressive to get through so much in such a short period of time. And it's really exciting to hear those plans to 2030. And yeah, a couple of takeaways immediately for me were, the importance of a science-based target and approach. And then, that stat you had around 80% of your emissions are in the hands of sort of 300, I think you said, of your suppliers. So the opportunity through thinking about your supply chain. So yeah, thank you for that. That's a really great start. I would now like to turn to Derwent London to talk through the approach they're taking. So another of our London business climate leaders, and we have 2 today who are focused and leaders in tackling emissions from the built environment, which make up about 3/4 of London's direct emissions. So I'm really pleased to be joined by Damian Wisniewski. I hope I've said that right, Damian, or at least got it at least in the correct ballpark. Chief Financial Officer from Derwent London. So I hand over to you now.
Thanks very much, Pete, and good afternoon, everyone. Can I just say it's great to be here today and be a part of this, telling you a little bit more about Derwent London's journey to net zero. So my name is Damian Wisniewski, CFO of Derwent London. We're a FTSE 250 company which invests in, manages and develops mainly office buildings around London in the West End and city borders. We're the largest of the real estate investment trusts or REITs specialising in London offices. Our portfolio is about 5.6 million square feet across over 80 buildings, and it's home to over 350 businesses, large and small. Next slide, please. Derwent London has long been known for high quality design and buildings which offer both flexibility in use, what we call long life, loose fit, and value for money. As a London business climate leader, we've put ESG, occupier wellness and amenity, including converting car spaces to cycle racks and added showers, high up on our priority list for some years, mainly because these are increasingly the issues that matter to our occupiers and their people. Our business model is essentially to acquire tired buildings, often with poor environmental credentials, and gradually to upgrade them or redevelop them. If you like, making brown buildings greener. Next slide, please. Now, recognizing the carbon intensity of the built environment, we hired a head of sustainability in 2013, and we published our first sustainability report later that year. We believe it is important to demonstrate leadership from the top. So we next established board committees for sustainability, then responsible business, followed by net zero carbon. And in February 2020, I think the same month as Sky, we were the first REIT to commit to having a net zero carbon portfolio by 2030. Our pathway to achieving this was published in June 2020, and it's available on our website if you're interested. We've got 4 people in our sustainability team, with a further 1 joining shortly, but it's actually the way they contribute and collaborate across the business that really counts. The quality and integrity of data and reporting is also a concern, and all our key sustainability metrics are independently assured for us by Deloitte. Next slide. In 2019, we were the first REIT to arrange a green revolving credit facility and publish a green finance framework in accordance with the green loan principles. This helps to ensure that the climate change targets we set ourselves are embedded throughout our business. We're updating our leases and training our property managers to help achieve our net zero targets, working with our tenants to reduce scope 3 emissions. And our electricity suppliers across the portfolio are on renewable backed tariffs. We're retrofitting buildings to make them greener. Witness the T building, which you see here in Shoreditch, where we have our Green T initiative. That includes upgraded windows, better insulation, and we also move heat around the building. So the hot parts, we pump heat into the colder parts. By setting and reporting on science-based targets, we've made important steps to reduce both our carbon and energy intensities, as you'll see from the numbers here. Next slide, please. Now on to 80 Charlotte Street. This is our last completed building, completed last year, and our first net zero carbon building, being all electric and with class leading levels of embodied carbon. The building provides high quality amenities internally and externally, with terraces and a small pocket park. We've bought high quality offsets from carbon removal projects through a verified scheme, and 80 Charlotte Street achieved BREEAM Excellent and LEED Gold. Next slide, please. Is there one more slide? Thank you. All of us need to make much more progress, and we continue to work with our consultants and supply chain to minimize our carbon impact, using materials such as cross-laminated timber and low-carbon concrete where it's feasible. We have carbon appraisals for all new projects and are working on carbon accounting to better understand both our embodied carbon across the portfolio and our annual emissions. Most of our tenants are aligned, and we believe these initiatives are good for our business and growth, as well as being the right things to do. Lower carbon buildings will command stronger rents, higher values, and will let more quickly. There are also increasingly strict targets for energy performance in buildings, which we're working towards. 66% by rental value of our current portfolio is in performance bands A to C, and only 1% in F or below. Next slide, please. We're working with our occupiers to measure and minimize net carbon while recognizing that the built environment cannot be a low carbon industry. We're focusing on renewable energy, materials, recycling where we can, water usage, green finance, and collaborating with advanced technology providers. I'm pleased to say that our stakeholders are with us on this journey, and we've noticed a marked uptake in ESG questions from our shareholders and debt providers in the last 12 to 18 months. There is so much more to do, but this is a year to capitalize on the momentum in the property sector by collaborating to make lasting progress towards a climate-safe future. Thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you very much, Damian. Really exciting to hear all of the hard work you and your team are doing, and a couple of takeaways from me immediately there. The importance of that collaboration across the business, which really counts to making a difference. The independent assurance as well, and also embedding those principles through the business and everything you do. It's really exciting also to see some real examples of buildings that are already here today, as well as hearing examples of sort of plans for the future as well. So just before we move on to the next speaker, I'd just like to remind everyone that you can submit questions via the Q&A on Zoom. So please feel free. We've had one so far, but get stuck in. I'm sure people are looking forward, panelists are looking forward to answering those as well. So I'd now like to move on to hear a slightly different perspective, from the SME sector. So I'm delighted to be joined by Pillai, partner in sustainable ventures at Circled Up, a Federation of Small Business member. So a warm welcome to you, Sat, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you for organising both to the GLA and to the CBI for this excellent event. Just for some context, Circled Up is a business that helps groups of organisations work together for the greater good. And with our stakeholder analytics solution, our clients can do so significantly better in fewer meetings, calls, and emails. Technically, we're classified as a micro business. In other words, a business with fewer than 10 employees. So why would we, as a micro business, make a net zero commitment with all these larger businesses around us who clearly can make a greater impact than we can? Well, what does it really mean for a small business like ours to be net zero by 2030, particularly as we provide a business service and not a tangible product? How do we deal with our energy consumption or manage our consumables, such as printing supplies or electronic equipment, and so on? And because we follow an associate model where colleagues from different small businesses work together to help our clients, where do they fit into our commitment? Who is measuring how far we are with our own commitment, given we don't really need to report it to anyone? Do we measure our own progress ourselves, and with what tool? But before I dive in, some background on the next slide about small businesses that I always like to talk about. So as you'll see here, this chart shows the number of businesses by size across each of the London boroughs in 2020. What you'll notice is the amount of deep orange color that shows the number of businesses with fewer than 5 people. Next, you'll see that there is a little bit of gray. That is the number of businesses with between 5 and 9 people. Both of those colors show the number of micro businesses in London by borough. Next, you have colors that show small businesses which have between 10 and 50 employees. And then other colors for medium-sized businesses employing between 51 and 249 people. Typically, this whole group of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses are referred to as small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs. You'll also notice that there are colors for large businesses employing 250 people or more. Maybe you knew this already, but over 98% of all businesses are classified as micro or small. And on average, in each borough in London, there are over 15,000 businesses similar in size to Circled Up. Meanwhile, just 1.5% of London's businesses are classified as medium-sized, and less than half of 1% are large businesses. In aggregate, across the UK, SMEs account for 60% of the employment, shown in blue in the smaller chart, and 2.3 trillion pounds of turnover across the UK, or half the turnover of the UK private sector, as shown in grey in the small chart. So this takes us to the first lesson for Circled Up as we make our net zero commitment. If we move on to the next slide. And that is that it is a fallacy to think that micro and small businesses play only a micro or small role in achieving net zero. Our business segment is the sleeping giant or the elephant in the room, not just a bunch of passive bystanders. So we're pivotal in helping London reach net zero. About a fifth of all SMEs operate in the construction sector. 15% of SMEs, including Circled Up, are in the professional, scientific, and technical sector, and 9% are in the wholesale and retail, trade and repair sector. That still leaves about 50% in a variety of other sectors. So how do we small and micro businesses adopt net zero practices when our priorities are so day-to-day and our businesses are so diverse and our situations are so unique? Well, not surprisingly, micro and small businesses like Circled Up are not necessarily making the net zero commitment for business reasons, not for business growth or for compliance purposes. That might be the case with some larger businesses that need to report to their shareholders, debt investors, supply chains, or customers. Our focus is simply on the day-to-day and doing business development and delivering for the customer. Unlike larger businesses, many micro and small businesses can't afford to have dedicated staff, for example, focused on sustainability. Our staff tend to wear multiple hats. And while that makes us nimble when times are good, we're also not as resilient as larger firms. And we run the risk of overlooking our net zero commitments, both in good times and in bad. We also do not have the negotiation power of large businesses. In many ways, micro and small businesses behave like consumers when it comes to making a net zero commitment. And like consumers, Circled Up made our net zero commitment based on being inspired. So who or what have been our sources of inspiration? Well, first and foremost, the biggest source of inspiration for us has been the Federation of Small Businesses, which has been a membership-based body with over 200,000 businesses and provides a huge array of services and support. But on this page, as you see here, there are other sources of inspiration too. Given the climate emergency, all of these people, organizations, and initiatives provide valuable information for us to take action. And these are just a handful of them. Every day we get to hear of yet another group sharing information or certifications on the road to net zero, which brings us to the second lesson we've learned on our next slide, which is that many micro and small businesses like ours do not have the bandwidth to tune into net zero information. Our sole focus, as I said earlier on, is on the day-to-day, but the noise of more net zero initiatives, campaigns, hubs, and platforms is only getting louder. But how to reach micro and small businesses through these lots of channels so that the message gets to the widest audience? Well, without overwhelming, confusing, or numbing us as micro and small businesses, we have a suggestion based on the actions that we've taken, that we've been inspired to take on the next slide. So we've switched to solar, low energy lighting, public transport, hybrid working, and green investments. We've signed up to various net zero campaigns and the Good Business Charter. We've been working on B Corp accreditation, and we'll sign up to the Cycle to Work scheme. Although with the current lockdown, we've had to carry the cycle from the shed upstairs to the home office. We've used the principles of the circular economy, such as the concept of buying products as a service, where the supplier takes care of the entire life cycle of the product. For example, although we print minimally, we rely on HP's instant ink service. We recycle all our paper, we recycle our electronic and electric waste, such as old phones and laptops. But when we looked at all of our actions in aggregate, what we learned was the third lesson shown on the next slide. And that is that we tend to prefer government incentives, especially those focused on resource efficiency. And if these incentives are aligned to our place of work, wherever that might be, and to our transportation modes, we see benefits not only in our business P&L, but also at our kitchen table conversations. So from a small and micro business perspective, shown on the next slide, what we need are more grants and incentives based on, for example, business rate or tax relief for energy efficiency, for electric and ultra-low emission vehicles, and for hybrid working. These will help cut carbon emissions through less traffic and greener vehicles. We'd appreciate innovative travel options such as demand pricing on TfL and on the roads so that we can flatten the peaks of traffic across the working day. We'd benefit from more EV charging points in easy to access locations, perhaps even incentivizing home adaptations for those who are hybrid workers. Micro and small businesses don't have the resources that larger businesses have, but with a helping hand from larger businesses and from government, we can participate in creating net zero supply chains and net zero ecosystems. Making London a circular economy city would make us more resource efficient too. Supply and demand would reset as we put in place all of the 9 R's of the circular economy: recycle, repurpose, refurbish, remanufacture, repair, reuse, and refuse materials that contribute to carbon emissions. Ultimately, we'd like to reduce these materials altogether by designing them out of our supply chains. But we'd also like to see less of other things, as I share on the next slide. We'd like to see fewer suspensions of incentives, such as the recent scrappage scheme suspension. These changes make it difficult for micro and small businesses to plan ahead, and disruptive demonstrations tend to lead to lost trade for most of us as well. But most importantly, we'd like to have the plethora of net zero initiatives, platforms, campaigns, and hubs to work together more effectively so that they have a clear proposition or a clearer proposition between them aimed at micro and small businesses. And with that, I come full circle to what we do at Circled Up, which is around enabling groups of organizations to work together for the greater good using stakeholder analytics. And I have there on the screen a summary of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sat, for that perspective from the SME sector. That's really, really helpful indeed. You know, I think it's important, and often we lose sight of the importance of the SME and micro sectors to the UK economy and the London economy, the role they can, of course, play in tackling the challenge we face, the importance then of government incentives, and also that clarity and consistency of message. So just a quick plug, I think, whilst I'm allowed to, I'm hosting it for our own business hub, where we do bring together a range of different pieces of advice for different sectors, different businesses in the London economy, to give them some pointers as to where they could focus and start through their own net zero journey. So I'd encourage people to take a look at that if they can. Okay, thank you, Sat. Now we'll turn to the last of our London business climate leaders. It's a real pleasure to have Graham Edgell, Director of Sustainability and Procurement for Morgan Sindall Group, with us today, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Good afternoon, everybody. Just to put this into context, the Morgan Sindall Group is a FTSE 250 UK-wide construction and regeneration group, and we cover all sectors of the built environment. We are also committed and aligned with the London Mayor's ambition to be net zero in 2030. And I guess our big message today is a whistle-stop tour, which is to collaborate and move our business forward alongside the London ambition. I won't read the slides verbatim, but at the end of the day, the importance of the built environment is massive. We are one of the biggest impactors, and therefore at Morgan Sindall and across our sector, not just our business, but others, we realise now that we need to be responsible and move that agenda on. So the next slide, please. In our sector, why? I think that the growing clamour to move on and the leadership shown by the London Mayor and others has driven our business. We've also we've had science-based targets validated since 2018, and we're an A-list in the Carbon Disclosure Project. So we've got some credentials, but it's still a massive push to get further on and to complete the ambition. In our sector, which is, and in fairness to Sat, he mentioned 15% of his members were in the built environment. Well, they are. Our supply chains are 85% SMEs. And so the need to transmit that throughout our supply chain and collaborate is huge. Go to the next slide, please. So as we've moved forward, we've had to, like Fiona said earlier, we've also had to take a top-down approach as well as a bottom-up approach, funnily enough, in our industry. We've got 500 mobile factories across the UK called construction projects, many of which are in the London area. So we've had to set pathways for the business that complements the science-based targets and the commitment to move forward. And we've recognised the need to join together with the supply chain. We're founder members of the Supply Chain School, which is based in London with 135 partners. And it's got a reach there where it's free for SMEs, it's free to learn. And there's a massive learning pathway there, which has got best of class information. Next slide, please. How do we move forwards? Well, again, repeating what other people have said, the data was important. And so we've now got over 11 years of audited third-party data. We've modelled and scoped the business. We've got an internal carbon panel that crosses all of our businesses and leadership from John Morgan himself to drive the business forwards. And the need to set targets and reward people on the run. So far at the moment, we've resisted the offset because we need to actually reduce the impact before we take the next step. The next slide, please. So as we've moved forwards, we've had challenges and barriers. And really, I guess the biggest one was getting people in the early days to take us seriously and the need for action and the need to do it now. And so we've actually created some tools of our own. So we have our own carbon calculator, which gives us whole life carbon for both the operation in constructing or retrofitting the project and also the life of the building. Alongside it, because we realized it's got social value, we've produced our own social value bank, which is another software program which enables our businesses to show project by project the legacy data and the value driven to the wider community. To make it easier for SMEs, we've created a portal for them to give us their scope 1 and 2 data or our scope 3 data and try and audit that as we go and offer the help in collating that information. We have got our own first offset, which is actually an inset. We're creating a new woodland in lowland England with over 280,000 trees in it, and we're commencing the planting operations in November this year. So all in all, and the last one there says the client buy-in, well, Carbonica is our carbon calculator. So we're even going to use that on our woodland to see how that takes us forwards. Have a next slide, please. I won't go into any detail with these slides because, but I wanted to show an example of the fact we have to model the carbon. We have to show the level of importance. So there's a dotted line on the where you see the yellow slice. If we did nothing today and just carried on business as usual, that little dotted line will be where we are. So you can see the way the task is, where we need to bring that yellow curve down to meet our ambitions. Can I have the next slide, please? And we realized that in our business, there is no way that we can actually do that by just issuing directives to our supply chain. So we've really taken a bottom-up approach, and we've got 7,000 employees across the UK, and each of those employees is involved in the process of reducing, where we can, our carbon emissions. And it's very demanding, but all the stakeholders need to be involved. And if I could have the next slide, please. And again, our value chain is some 5,000, which is significant, but we're in the same category really, that probably only 200 companies make up 80% of our major scope 3 emissions. So we're working hard with them now, with really the big message is to continue to collaborate with all parties and right through to the end users. I mean, there are 27 million homes in the United Kingdom that will need a retrofit. So the next slide, please. In the last 12 months, we've introduced an internal carbon tax. Why have we done that? And it's our opportunity to accelerate the program. So our businesses are incentivized to reduce their carbon, to reduce their tax. So that money's accrued at the center. Excuse me, pardon me. And it is then used to actually fund projects which will reduce our carbon emissions for the longer term. May I have the next slide, please? I told you it was going to be a whistle-stop one. So again, energy in the buildings. We're still putting gas in buildings. We need to move on. And the whole sector is trying to get technology and up to speed. We're in the same journey with our transport in terms of the transmission to electric vehicles, but our light commercial vehicles, we're pushing the whole sector to move on with us. We've also our solar program's been there for a while. 99% of our business is now renewable energy. And the big one, I guess, where we are at the moment is to try and drive the circular economy so that we can actually start to reduce where we are. And I think that, there's really my whistle-stop tour, but what I would like to do is to just move on and show you our approach in practice. It's a brief animation narrated by one of our site managers. It's a schools project of where we've tried to reduce our carbon.
It will get energy from air source heat pumps and more than 500 square metres of solar panels positioned on the roof. Even the Bunsen burners in the science labs will run on electricity. The construction site itself has been designed with more than 32 photovoltaic panels which entirely power the site offices, canteen, toilets and even the CCTV system. We have chosen carbon neutral hoarding which stretches some 360 metres around the front perimeter of site and is saving 12 tonnes of carbon.
So I guess our message in the end really is that at Morgan Sindall we started with a drumbeat and we've made it a heartbeat to reduce carbon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graham. And I must say I'm very impressed with how you all are getting through so much material in such a whistle-stop way, as you said, Graham. Congratulations again, and really inspiring to hear around, in particular, those tools that you've developed and how you're sort of using them. The importance of collaboration, as you said, and capturing the value of what you're doing, so that you can showcase that to the communities you're serving as well, and also really interesting to hear about your internal carbon tax there as well. So thanks very much, and I'm sure some of those issues will come up in the Q&A as well. So I'll now turn to our last speaker, who's been waiting very patiently and joins us from the US. So thank you very much to Nancy Mahon, Senior Vice President of Global Corporate Citizenship and Sustainability at Estee Lauder Companies. Over to you, Nancy, and welcome.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you so much for having us here. This will be our third London Climate Week, and I do want to say that I felt a little torn between taking notes from my colleagues and sort of going over my notes here. The comments that other colleagues have made have been so helpful, so I'll try and intersperse some thoughts on those as well. So first of all, the UK is an incredibly important market for us. It was actually the second market that Mrs. Estee Lauder established in 1960. So although we are not have our global headquarters here, certainly we think of it as our second home market. And like my colleagues, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of our built environment and the footprint of our business so that you get a sense of the scope of our business, and then just talk really humbly, I think, about some of the lessons that we've learned as a business on this journey. We have significant investments in the UK, as I mentioned, including the UK and Ireland headquarters at 1 Fitzroy in Fitzrovia, which was built to BREEAM excellent standards. We found across the board that change starts at home, and that green buildings and green operations are important not only to the communities where we live, work, and source, but almost more importantly to our employees, and they're a key piece of that work. I also want to applaud the Mayor and the UK generally for setting such high targets, particularly laddering into COP26. The UK for so many years, as you know, has been a global climate leader. And you certainly, in terms of physical size, I think punch above your weight in terms of the policy impact that you have. So this important goal that the Mayor has set, we look forward to being part of the solution. And also, as I mentioned, we're here to listen and learn, and we very much want to partner across our business. We're joined by Sue Fox, our incredibly able general manager in the UK region, as well as Anna Bartle, who is our head of public affairs. So similar to the UK, we have a framework for the work that we do when we talk about being beauty inspired and values driven. I think we're in a new age of business where the business of business is not just business, but also, more importantly, how do we leave the communities where we live, work, and source in better shape than we found them to begin with? And a big piece of that is climate, particularly coming out of COVID. And we're also very much aware as a luxury company that there is a big overlap between what folks call climate justice and gender justice and economic justice. And there is Pete had mentioned at the beginning, the sort of twin engines of pollution and of climate. There definitely, I'm sorry, the Mayor mentioned that, is that we see a huge overlap, and we want to make sure, particularly as a luxury company, that we're part of the solution. So alongside all these environmental initiatives, we have a very robust ELC Companies Foundation, and we're funding things like girls' education across the world, ensuring that girls and women in particular move out of poverty, which we've sadly seen during COVID, more and more women are moving into poverty. So in terms of our goals, again, we speak about these humbly. In 2016, we pledged to achieve net zero carbon goal for scopes 1 and 2 by 2020. We happily reached that goal last year early. So we met both net zero carbon emissions, and we sourced 100% of renewable energy globally. In November of last year, we also set, similar to some of my colleagues, science-based targets. For our company, scopes 1 and 2 is only 5% of our total footprint. And similar, I think, to Graham, scope 3 is a very big piece of our work, 95%, and that primarily is working with our suppliers. And across our journey, I think there's been sort of 3 headlines I would put out there for you. One is to leverage our position as the leading global house of prestige beauty. In other words, leverage your size. Similar to the way that SAT is leveraging his size as a micro business, we need to bring scale, particularly to the creation of green energy. 2 is we want to prioritize the creation of green energy solutions. We found as a large company that generally, sadly, globally, we currently do not have enough green energy supply to solve and to reach all of our goals. So how do we as a business join arms with everyone here and create those and invest in those green energy solutions? And then 3, listen and learn from companies and other companies, NGOs and governments, similar to what we're doing here today. The important piece to understand is that I often say that climate and sustainability is not a net zero game. It's not a zero-sum game, I'm sorry. We're all in this together, and that all of us reaching these goals is in all of our best interests. So in terms of high quality solutions, similar to many of the folks who've spoken to you here today, we've taken a portfolio approach to achieving our goals. So for instance, in the United States, which represents about 50% of our total electrical footprint, we invested in a virtual power purchase agreement, which is allowable under US law, and for 22 megawatts of wind power. We essentially invested in the equivalent of 10 wind turbines in Oklahoma in the United States. And that was an effort where we basically worked with other Fortune 500 companies, and we enabled green energy to be built and also the creation of local jobs. The Canada electrical footprint, which is also half of our global electrical footprint, we've done microgrids. And so again, we're taking locally relevant portfolio approach. We also have many on-site solar arrays. Our UK division has been a great leader in that and an early adopter. In 2017, our UK manufacturing plant in Petersfield unveiled a 1 megawatt solar array. So for our solar, we do both on-site solar, we sort of maxed out our roofs as it were, and we also have done solar farms as they're called. We have one of those in Blaine, Minnesota. We're looking at also possibly in doing some of that work in China. Another big piece is employees, and I know our colleagues have spoken about this. Fiona mentioned it as well. I mean, at the end of the day, your employees power your business, and they certainly power your climate solutions. We have green teams in every single one of our divisions, and we find that very similar to financial savings or financial goals or commercial goals, that our employees, particularly our frontline employees, have the solutions to energy solutions. So one of the pieces we've really focused on is engaging employees through an interactive learning hub. We're trying to put together and make available real-time climate data. And I know this was a big theme. I believe Graham mentioned it, and also Fiona. You know, high quality data, verified data, and accessible data, so that the employees in particular can see the differences that they're making. In terms of what I mentioned around high quality solutions, you know, in Whitman Labs, which as I mentioned is in Petersville, the system provides 10 to 12% of the manufacturing site's annual electricity. We want to increase that number as we build. Again, we want to engage our employees. Another important, but perhaps not so sexy area is LED lighting. You know, we're a retail company and we have big manufacturing plants. And we have switched to LED lighting in the UK and Ireland at our high-tech distribution centers. I think particularly post-COVID, we have a big focus on our value chain. People really understand supply chain, and they want to understand where the products are being made, and the people who are making those products really want to be engaged in building a better world. Also, in terms of high-quality solutions, we really believe in reforestation. I know most recently Bill Gates has said perhaps not forestry is the solution. We believe forestry is a solution, and we are very excited about participating in that. So we participated in a reforestation project in partnership with the Future Forest Company, and Joe Malone has funded 6 community gardens around mental health, 2 of which are based here in London over the past 5 or 6 years with their charity Candle. Also, another one of our brands, Origins, has made donations to the National Trust conservation charity. And again, we really want to applaud the UK and encourage and support these efforts around forests. It's also, forests are a great way to engage our kids, candidly. The understanding that, you know, forests take carbon out of the air and how important they are for our global world. And lastly, as I mentioned, we want to listen and learn and partner with other companies, NGOs, and governments. So as I mentioned, we have joined the Science Based Target Initiative. Our goal for scopes 1 and 2 are at -1.5 degrees. We're taking a look at our scope 3 and possibly a 2050 goal, particularly as we ladder into COP. And what we feel is so important about science-based target is it is, as Graham has mentioned, a global standard, and that it will be independently validated. And so it's given us a narrative, a framework, I'd say a vocabulary to speak with all of our stakeholders, most particularly our investors. And we're fortunate enough to be included in quite a few ESG climate funds, and we learn from those investors every day as well. I think where we also feel, as I mentioned, that we will have our greatest impact is on our scope 3. And one of the great challenges our business has, which it sounds as if many of the businesses here have, is growth. So as folks know, once you set a science-based target and you've reached net zero in RE100, the game isn't over on scopes 1 and 2. As you grow, you have to continue to meet net zero and RE100. And so what we've done in terms of setting our target is we've set it by per unit of revenue, because we feel that as a growth business, that is the best way to do that. And so we committed to reduce our scope 3 emissions from purchased goods and services, upstream transportation and distribution, and business travel, which is a big piece of the work that we do. And hopefully next year we'll be able to join you in person in London along with our colleagues. So we basically, we pledged to reduce that by 60% per unit of revenue. And that I think is globally the big challenge, which is how do you grow business, but also grow climate solutions at the same time. Again, we are really looking to leverage our scale. We found generally that the green energy solutions need to be scaled across the world. So in closing, again, we're so happy to be here and really want to applaud the UK, London for setting such high targets. We're here to be part of the solution. And as we say, we're beauty inspired and values driven. At the end of the day, our employees are what is driving all of our solutions, particularly our climate solutions. And we look forward to building a stable climate together. And really, again, thank you to the many speakers. I learned so much, and I will follow up with all of you and look forward to partnering moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for finishing a really inspiring set of presentations. And, a few things I take away there. The scope 1 and 2 element is small for you, but you still can't lose sight of it. That's a really important point. I think you said 95% of your emissions are scope 3 at the moment. So obviously there is an important piece of work to think about your supply chain too. You mentioned there engaging people, your customers and employees on the journey. Of course, that's massively important. And I like the not everything has to be sexy to be worth doing. I think that is a really important point as well. So you talked there about the LED lighting. So some of the steps that can be taken are actually pretty straightforward, and not everything has to be sort of very bling to be worth while doing. So thank you very much to the panel. We turn now to the Q&A. So we have about 15 minutes, just slightly less left for Q&A before we wrap up. So if I could, I'd start with Fiona, if I may. Just a question about the importance of committing to a target and publishing action plans, and how that served your business in working towards your net zero targets. If you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, committing to a target is really, really important. I think every business, and especially in the UK, has been encouraged to set targets and to sign up to the Race to Zero. It's really important to set as ambitious a target as possible when we're looking at how we are really going to transition to a net zero kind of world across the whole value chain, because this is unlike, I would say, over the last 10 years, where a lot of businesses, and quite rightly so, have been focusing on their direct business, their scopes 1 and 2. We've made incremental changes, I think, and incremental reductions, kind of a 4% kind of reduction on each year. And when we look at net zero and what we need to do across our whole supply chain and, the impact in our customer footprint, it's going to take real innovation. It's going to take business transformation, and the only way to do that is kind of to tear up the rule books of what we've been using previously, One way to do that is to set a really ambitious time-bound target in order to do that. We did something very similar as part of our campaign around Sky Ocean Rescue back in 2017. We set a target across our business to be single-use plastic free across our whole business and our supply chain and our products by the end of 2020, which we achieved. And the only way that we did that was to set a target that was so ambitious, we had to rethink how we designed packaging and how we shipped products to our customer homes. And I think that's the type of ambition and focus that we need with net zero carbon target. I also think that it's really important as part of that to be really transparent, to kind of measure your footprint and to be transparent and put that out into the public domain, because that way, it's the targets out there and your performance and your where you are on that journey is out there in the public domain as well.
Somebody had to do it. I was struggling for my unmute button there. Sorry about that. Thank you, Fiona. I'm just turning to some of the questions in the chat for a moment. So, Sat, there's a question there. I see you're willing to get hold of an answer from Syed Ahmed. We are awaiting a number of key strategies from government, which have been on hold for a while, which are likely to have a big impact on London. These include the heating and buildings, transport decarbonisation strategy, achieving net zero strategies, and also further thinking around hydrogen. So how important is it for businesses to get clarity on these future pathways?
Okay, I think that's a bit of a loaded question. Of course, it's really, really important for businesses of all sizes to get clarity on this. And, we've had lots of sort of geopolitical challenges over the last 2-3 years, and I think government's working on it. I'm all for getting clarity. I think the challenge is, particularly cities and governments have lots of moving pieces that they have to understand before they say, let's go for green and let's go for moving forward on this. And I think that's the challenge we have. The information that governments and cities are getting is still lagging behind what they need to make those decisions, and let's hope that happens quickly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sat, for that. Graham, if I could just turn to you for a moment. Just another question in the chat, so going slightly off piste for you, which I thought was quite interesting. You mentioned your internal carbon tax, and it's a question, and perhaps others on the panel might have a view as well. How far away do you feel that the UK is from a comprehensive, explicit carbon tax structure?
We've been paying carbon tax generally anyway, but the internal carbon tax for us was the acceleration, really. So it's not for me to decide on, or even take a view really on government or legislation, but the clock is ticking. I think we've heard that expression several times today, and it's imminent, if you wanted my opinion.
Okay, that's a great answer. So use it anyway internally to accelerate efforts, I think, rather than sort of wait for others, is what I take from that. So Damian, if I could just turn to you for a second. I was just thinking, we've heard some, a number of amazing journeys that businesses have been on and progress that's been made to date. So just sort of thinking back to your business, what have you learned over that journey? What advice would you offer to those who are sort of earlier stages and just starting that journey?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Yeah, I think firstly, to anyone starting, remember it is a journey. It has to start. It's a long journey. It's going to go on for the rest of our lives. So have a good start. Don't be afraid to make a few mistakes. I would say we've all got a lot to learn. We can all learn from each other. I think just having this panel today, and I'm sure there are lots of other people in similar situations, we've all heard things that we've all said and thought, that's a good idea. So I think we can all learn from each other. I think it's terribly important to get buy-in from the top. And I think we've seen that with all the companies here today. Everyone has had a commitment from right at the top of the organisation. That is important. And you've seen it again with the mayor. We've got to get people really at the top of the food chain, stressing the importance of this. I think the other thing for me is good words are fine, but really we've got to get action here. And the only way you can really identify action is by measuring it. And I think one of my concerns a bit about this whole thing is the quality and integrity of data. And one does see a certain amount of greenwashing and going on. I think one has to be very careful. So I think companies have to be very honest and work out how they can best manage their own data, make sure it's properly assured, make sure it's reliable. So those are the things for me, really. So start small, but think big.
Start small, think big. That's great. And don't be afraid to break a few eggs on the way. That's great. So Nancy, I'm just turning to the chat again, and there's a question here around sort of hopes and expectations from COP26. I thought it'd be interesting to get your perspectives as a citizen in the US on what you hope to see from your government in 2022 in relation to climate.
Yeah, well, in terms of, I think, what we hope from all governments, and I have to say, governments are legendarily slow movers, and I'm very heartened as a citizen of the world that governments are moving much more quickly. I don't think there's one silver bullet or one solution. So there might be carbon taxes in certain jurisdictions, there might be tax breaks or tax incentives in others. For the US, I think we have a proud moment where hopefully we will retake the sort of some level of climate leadership globally and join really China and the UK and France and so many other nations. So in terms of COP26, my hope really is that the government really kind of sets the table, raises the bar, gives some clarity on the -1.5 degrees and the 2050 targets and 2050 targets, I'm sorry. And, I primarily see it as someone running a business program as primarily a government meeting. It is a very important meeting, though, in terms of setting the table and setting the bar very high. So we are going to listen. I do think, one piece I would also say is that we're very hopeful as a company that is primarily employing women and serves primarily women, that there will be a gender voice there for women and girls around the really horrible, disproportionate impact that climate and climate change has on women and girls. So, we're part of the solution there. And then just lastly, what many folks here have said is this is really about leadership from the top, and then really kind of horizontal integration throughout the enterprise, including governments. But certainly as a company, we spent a lot of time also, as folks have mentioned, on data. And then lastly on data, our government, the SEC, is really looking at climate data and looking at climate data as if it is financial grade data. So I think that we want to make sure that we get this all right, so we're not investing in multiple systems, and that we do raise the bar in a way that is fair and incentivizes business.
Terrific, thanks, Nancy. And I'm gonna keep with you for a second, and we'll make this the last question, and for everybody to have a go at. But seeing as you're going, we'll carry on with you. So Dan Cunningham mentions in the chat that you spoke about the importance of providing real-time, accessible and verifiable climate data to employees. How do you balance centrally driven initiatives, large investments like you mentioned around solar farms, versus on-the-ground operational improvements that teams on the front line can make? Does one come before the other in a net zero roadmap?
I think they go hand in hand. I mean, globally, what we're trying to do, again, is bring scale and bring best practices. Locally, as you know, what is great about the way that the climate goals are structured is you need local solutions. You have to build green energy solutions. So we're working, as Fiona is, on creating a solution in China. And so in order to do that, the global climate team comes in. We then need to work with our local partners in procurement, in manufacturing. And so there really is, I think, a great synergy of global solutions and scale and best practices with very locally relevant solutions. At the end of the day, we're a consumer goods company. And so we want to make sure that whatever solutions we deploy are relevant to our consumers and to our brands there, and also to our employees. So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's both end.
Great, thank you very much. Fiona, I'll give that one over to you just for your perspective as well.
No, I totally agree. I think it's both. You need to have a look at the kind of big solutions that you're doing within your supply chain, whether it's within your kind of product efficiency or design. You know, we do the kind of big strategic things like, you know, look at doing kind of life cycle assessments for all of our products. So we've got, you know, teams looking at where the carbon hotspots are, and some of those will be based in the UK operationally, some of those will be overseas in our supply chain. But the importance piece is also to make those changes at home and you know, and kind of support changes that are very visible to people. So they might be a smaller impact on the overall carbon, but they are just as important. So how employees commute to work, for example, you know, supporting kind of local initiatives with, you know, the local kind of transport, you know, hubs and networks, looking at our shuttle buses, ensuring that our shuttle buses go over to kind of electric. Those are all really important because they visibly show your local community, but also your employees, you know, how fast and how important the initiative is for your business, whereas they might not always have oversight of the big strategic things that we're doing in supply chain, for example.
Great answer. Thank you, Fiona. Graham, do you want to pick up on this one? If you've got any more thoughts on it.
Well, I think both Fiona and Nancy have done it really, but for us, I think in our sector, we can't wait for legislation. We need to actually keep driving and pushing forward. So we'd like to think, like all the businesses on today who've spoken, we've tried to push the agenda, but they do need to be hand in hand. But not everything is that scalable, so you need to function your own business objective as well.
Great, thank you, Graham. Damian, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, just something to add, I think, which is I think a lot of this is about encouraging good personal responsibility and individual behaviour as well. I think one of the things we've all seen and felt over the last year or two is a change in the mindset. People, particularly younger people, I have to say, but they're making people like me get on board as well. You know, we've got to start behaving properly, thinking about our own personal responsibility. We've got buildings out there, for example, with opening windows. London's a fairly temperate place. Much of the year, you don't need air conditioning pumping out cold air. So we have a traffic light system in the white collar factory where you have a red or a green traffic light. If it's red, you don't open the windows. If it's a green light, you can. Things like that to help people do the right thing and reduce the amount of carbon that we are gobbling up.
Brilliant, thank you, Damian. And Sat, just turning to you finally.
Yeah, I think it's a combination, right? Because big finance has to move to actually structure and design new green projects, but big finance can only do so much. It then has to be implemented operationally. So I think it's a little bit of both, but it has to come top down. But people who are implementing need to be ready to do so, because there's no time to be lost.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Sat. I'm just looking at the time and impressively, we are almost through, you know, an incredible amount of content there, more or less on time. So I definitely had the easy part today, asking the questions, always more difficult to answer them. So a big thank you to all of our panelists today for, you know, really inspiring presentations, and also for, you know, really engaging content in that Q&A as well. You know, we have heard it's the year of COP, as we know, and we need to take action now and quickly, and, you know, thinking forward to not just this year but 2030. That is, you know, about 3,000 days, a little bit more away, so we have a lot to do. That commitment to doing it is exceptionally important, and hopefully people have got a flavour for, you know, the ways in which different businesses are really taking that head on, and it's really sort of exciting to hear. There's so much to be done, and I was trying to scribble some notes to sort of finish off on some of the themes, but there's so many. I've just ended up with a page worth of sort of scribbles, but you know, some themes coming through very importantly are around collaboration and thinking through SMEs and the supply chain, particularly important. Science-based targets came up a number of times, and sort of having that vocabulary to talk to supply chain and people in your business and the people you serve as well. Capturing that wider value we talked about, and really engaging people and changing that mindset. So I think I'll leave it there, because we've all got a really big job to do, so we better leave and get on with doing it now. And just a big thanks before I sign off and we leave. Thanks for joining to the audience today, and yeah, hope you picked up some really important and valuable lessons, and happy to sort of hear from you directly if there's more you'd like to discuss or talk about around this topic. So finally, just a big thank you again for everyone joining, and also to the panel for their great contributions as well. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of London Climate Action Week.